Power, wealth, influence. These three words are often synonymous with the lives of billionaires. But what do they really mean in the context of our modern world? These words intertwine when we talk about billionaires and their growing influence on governments worldwide. Their reach extends far beyond their business empires, seeping into the very fabric of our political systems. We like to believe in the democratic ideal, a government by the people, for the people. This ideal is the cornerstone of many nations, a beacon of hope and equality. But is that ideal fading, eclipsed by the vast fortunes of a select few? As the wealth gap widens, the influence of billionaires grows, casting long shadows over our democratic institutions. This is a question we must ask ourselves as we witness the subtle and not so subtle ways billionaires shape policies and, ultimately, our future. Their influence is often hidden, operating behind closed doors and through complex networks of power. We are living in an era of extreme wealth inequality. The disparity between the rich and the poor has never been more pronounced, creating a chasm that threatens the very foundation of our societies. A tiny fraction of the global population controls more wealth than ever before in human history. This concentration of wealth is not just a statistic, it represents a shift in power dynamics that affects us all. This concentration of wealth translates into immense power, and increasingly that power is being leveraged to influence the very institutions meant to hold it in check, our governments. The lines between public service and private gain are becoming increasingly blurred. This essay explores the methods billionaires use to exert their influence, from political donations and lobbying to strategic investments and philanthropic endeavors. These tactics are not always visible to the public eye, but their impact is profound. We'll examine real-world examples, delving into the complexities of China's Belt and Road Initiative and Elon Musk's foray into the world of politics. These case studies will shed light on how billionaires are reshaping global landscapes. Most importantly, we will confront the uncomfortable truth about the impact of unchecked wealth on democracy itself. The erosion of democratic principles is not just a theoretical concern, it has real-world consequences for governance and social stability. It's time to pull back the curtain and expose the mechanisms at play, for only then can we begin to imagine a different future, one where power rests with the people, not their billionaire overlords. The journey to reclaiming democracy starts with awareness and action. Let's be clear, democracy operates on money. Elections cost money. From the moment a candidate decides to run for office, the financial clock starts ticking. Campaigns need funds for everything from advertising to travel, from staff salaries to event planning. Without substantial financial backing, even the most promising candidates struggle to make their voices heard. Politicians need money to run their campaigns, to get their message out, to connect with voters. They need to pay for TV ads, social media campaigns, and the logistics of traveling across their constituencies. The cost of reaching every potential voter is astronomical, and it keeps rising with each election cycle. To get their message out, to connect with voters, and to build a robust campaign infrastructure, candidates rely heavily on donations. These donations fund everything from grassroots organizing to high-profile media buys. Without this financial support, their ability to compete is severely hampered. And where does a significant portion of that money come from? You guessed it, billionaires. These ultra-wealthy individuals have the resources to make substantial contributions, often in the form of maxed-out individual donations or through their own political action committees. Political donations are the most direct way for the ultra-wealthy to exert their influence. By writing large checks, they gain access to politicians and can sway their agendas. This financial power translates into political power, allowing them to shape policies that align with their interests. Large donations, often funneled through opaque networks of political action committees, make it difficult to trace the true source of the money. These PACs can raise unlimited amounts of money and spend it to support or oppose candidates, all while keeping the donors' identities hidden. These large donations give billionaires access and leverage. They can secure private meetings, influence legislative agendas, and ensure that their voices are heard above all others. This access is not available to the average voter, creating a significant imbalance in political influence. They buy phone calls, meetings, and influence over policy decisions. Then there's lobbying, a multi-billion-dollar industry dedicated to influencing government policy. Lobbyists work tirelessly to ensure that the interests of their clients are represented in the halls of power. A multi-billion-dollar industry dedicated to influencing government policy, lobbying is another tool used by the wealthy to shape legislation. Lobbyists, often well-connected and highly skilled, work to ensure that the laws and regulations benefit their clients. Billionaires, either directly or through industry groups, employ armies of lobbyists to push for legislation that benefits their interests. These lobbyists are often former politicians or government officials who use their insider knowledge to navigate the complex legislative process, employ armies of lobbyists to push for legislation that benefits their interests. These lobbyists, with their deep understanding of the political landscape, can craft persuasive arguments and build coalitions to support their causes. These lobbyists, often former politicians themselves, exploit their connections and insider knowledge to sway votes and shape legislation. They know the right people to call, the right committees to target, and the right arguments to make. Exploit their connections and insider knowledge to sway votes and shape legislation. The result? A system where politicians are beholden to their wealthy donors, their priorities skewed by the interests of the few, not the needs of the many. A system where politicians are beholden to their wealthy donors, their priorities skewed by the interests of the few, not the needs of the many. This creates a dangerous feedback loop. Policies that benefit the wealthy lead to greater wealth, which in turn buys more influence. Their priorities skewed by the interests of the few, not the needs of the many. This creates a dangerous feedback loop. Policies that benefit the wealthy lead to greater wealth, which in turn buys more influence, further tilting the playing field in their favor, not the needs of the many. This creates a dangerous feedback loop. Policies that benefit the wealthy lead to greater wealth, which in turn buys more influence, further tilting the playing field in their favor. This creates a dangerous feedback loop. Policies that benefit the wealthy lead to greater wealth, which in turn buys more influence, further tilting the playing field in their favor. Policies that benefit the wealthy lead to greater wealth, which in turn buys more influence, further tilting the playing field in their favor, which in turn buys more influence, further tilting the playing field in their favor, further tilting the playing field in their favor. Billionaires don't just influence governments through direct political means, they also exert their power through strategic investments. These investments are not just about making more money, they are about shaping the world to fit their vision and interests. By pouring vast sums into key sectors, they can steer the direction of entire industries and, by extension, society itself. They pour vast sums into key sectors like technology, energy, infrastructure, and media, often blurring the lines between personal gain and the public good. This influence extends far beyond mere financial returns. It impacts policy decisions, public opinion, and even cultural norms, often blurring the lines between personal gain and the public good. Their philanthropic efforts, while seemingly altruistic, often come with strings attached, subtly guiding public policy and opinion in ways that benefit their broader agendas. Take, for example, the tech industry. The rapid advancements in technology have not only created new markets, but have also redefined how we live and work. Billionaires like Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and Mark Zuckerberg have amassed unprecedented wealth and influence through their tech empires. Their companies are not just businesses, they are ecosystems that touch nearly every aspect of our lives. These companies, with their vast data troves and global reach, hold immense power, shaping how we communicate, consume information, and even how we think. The data they collect is not just a byproduct of their services, it is a valuable resource that can be used to predict and influence human behavior, shaping how we communicate, consume information, and even how we think. Social media platforms, for instance, have become the new public squares where ideas are exchanged and movements are born, but they are also places where misinformation can spread like wildfire, often with real-world consequences. Governments eager to foster innovation and economic growth often find themselves beholden to these tech giants. The promise of job creation and economic development can make it difficult for policymakers to resist the influence of these powerful entities. They offer tax breaks, regulatory loopholes, and lucrative government contracts, all in the name of progress. But at what cost? The concentration of power in the hands of a few can stifle competition and innovation, leading to a less dynamic and more unequal economy. As these companies grow more powerful, so too does their ability to dictate terms, influencing everything from data privacy laws to antitrust regulations. Their lobbying efforts are often aimed at creating a favorable regulatory environment that allows them to maintain their dominance, influencing everything from data privacy laws to antitrust regulations. The debate over data privacy is a prime example. While these companies argue that data collection is essential for improving services, critics warn that it poses significant risks to individual privacy and autonomy. The energy sector provides another stark example of this influence. The transition to renewable energy is a critical issue for the future of our planet, but it is also a battleground for competing interests. Fossil fuel billionaires have spent decades lobbying against climate action, downplaying the urgency of the crisis and blocking meaningful legislation. Their efforts have not only delayed the transition to cleaner energy, but have also contributed to the ongoing environmental degradation, downplaying the urgency of the crisis and blocking meaningful legislation. The construction of new oil pipelines, for instance, continues despite widespread protests and the growing evidence of climate change. Their investments in think tanks, public relations firms and political campaigns have sowed doubt and delayed action, with devastating consequences for our planet. These efforts are often aimed at creating a narrative that supports their interests, even if it means ignoring scientific consensus, with devastating consequences for our planet. The impact of these actions is felt globally, from deforestation in the Amazon to melting glaciers in the Arctic. The stakes could not be higher, and the need for action has never been more urgent. Philanthropy, at its core, is a noble pursuit. It's about using one's wealth to address social problems, to alleviate suffering, and to make the world a better place. But when it comes to billionaire philanthropy, things get a bit more complicated. Critics argue that billionaire philanthropy is often a form of reputation laundering, a way to deflect criticism and silence dissent while maintaining their grip on power. They point to the often undemocratic nature of these endeavors, where billionaires, rather than communities, dictate priorities. Moreover, the tax benefits associated with philanthropic giving raise concerns. By funneling their wealth through foundations, billionaires can avoid paying taxes on those assets while simultaneously wielding significant influence over the causes they choose to support.